I'm sickened to my core at the divisive nature of what's just taken place in this town. I want to thank the Social Democrats for bringing this motion, and I'd like to place a little context on it. I've less than 4 minutes, so I'll do my best. 2 days after we celebrated our national identity, nationally and internationally, 1,323 people on the 19th of March were on the streets of Dublin in tents. They were moved from Mount Street to another venue that was the subject of an arson attack on the site adjacent to it. People seeking asylum are the most vulnerable people in society. They're fleeing war and persecution. It's extremely important to use these words because that's what asylum seekers are. And in the majority of cases, they've made treacherous, lengthy journeys at huge personal costs. 29,250 people have died or gone missing in the Mediterranean since 2014. Last year alone, 3,129 died or went missing. Internationally, 110 million people have been displaced. 43.3 million were children. And of those, 36.4 million were refugees. And I'd like to make a few comments now, having given those figures in the minute and a half I've left. The two ministers sit here today totally on their own. Catherine Day produced a report back in September 2020 that said there was an urgent need for a cross-government approach. They pointed out, as has been pointed out by previous reports, that the direct provision was inhuman and not fit for purpose. 24 years later, we're still left with it. Yes, of course, we had over 100,000 people fleeing from the war in the Ukraine. But that's not the reason why the government failed to do something. They failed to implement their own white paper. You failed to implement Catherine Day's recommendations, and you utterly failed to implement all of the very modest recommendations from the McMahon report. And we sit here today with this type of divisive debate, which is absolutely beneath all of us, when really we're talking about a finite number of people. I think in 28,181 is the finite number we're talking about them, and almost 6,000 of those have refugee status. If this rich country can't cope with that finite number of people seeking asylum in this country, then I give up. In relation to the war in the Ukraine, we've utterly failed to use our voices for peace. We have been part of the warmongering and part of the government constantly eroding our neutrality. Of course, we will not, as a small country, be able to accept every single asylum seeker. That's not what this is about. It's about enforcing and complying with our legal obligations, while at the same time using our independence, our sovereignty and our neutrality for a voice for peace in the world and not for warmongering.